Picture this. You're standing in the backyard, the sharp smell of grilling meat filling the air, laughter echoing from the people who are supposed to love you most. Then your mom points right at you in front of the whole family and screams, "Noah, you're a complete failure. 32 years old, and still a nobody." The crowd goes silent, eyes stabbing into you like knives. Your dad, flipping steaks on the grill, smirks and says, "This guy's just messing around with his pathetic little project." Not like Sophie, the real pride of the Carters. My sister Sophie stands there in her fancy outfit, flashing a smug grin like she's just won the lottery. Relatives whisper, some chuckle. I grip my lemonade, my blood boiling, but I keep my mouth shut. They think I'm a loser, a shadow next to dazzling Sophie. They have no idea that tomorrow morning, I'll be sitting at the head of a boardroom, deciding Sophie's career dreams. They don't know I'm Evan Lynn, CEO of Cascade Logic, the multi-million-dollar company America admires. Will I let them keep mocking me, or will I make them choke on every insult they hurled at this BBQ? Stick around, and you'll see the moment my entire family crumbles when they learn the truth. I promise, you won't want to miss a second of it. The Carter family's annual BBQ was in full swing in the backyard of our suburban Phoenix, Arizona, home, where the 90 degrees Fahrenheit heat clung to the air even as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sizzle of ribeye steaks on the grill, mixed with the smoky scent of mesquite, the clink of beer bottles, and the loud voices of uncles arguing over fantasy football lineups. Kids darted through the yard, dodging folding chairs, while my Aunt Linda Hayes, her rosé glass glinting, rambled about her latest Vegas trip. The vibe was lively, but for me, Noah Carter, 32, it was just another act in a play where I was never the star. I stood alone by the wooden fence, watching my family like an outsider, my lemonade sweating in my hand. My mom, Diane Carter, in a loud floral blouse, held court in the middle of the crowd, bragging about my sister Sophie Bennett. Sophie just graduated, with dual master's degrees from Wharton and MIT. She bellowed, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. She's got interviews lined up with Fortune 500 companies. That girl's going places. Sophie, rocking a sleek pale blue jumpsuit, soaked up the praise with a cocky smile, tossing her hair like she was on a red carpet. My dad, Robert Carter, bobbed to everyone, stood by the grill, nodding proudly. "That's our real Carter champ right there," he said, wiping his hands on his apron. Relatives murmured agreement, Linda raising her glass. "You're a star, Sophie." I took a sip of lemonade, feeling the pitying glances from the crowd. Nobody mentioned me, unless it was to take a jab. To them, I was just Noah, the guy tinkering with some digital thing no one understood. They had no clue that thing was Cascade Logic, the tech company I built from a rundown Tempe apartment, now worth millions, and celebrated by Forbes. Standing there where some been to chatter and laughter. I felt trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. Growing up, I was always the extra kid in the Carter family. Sophie was the golden child, straight A student, gorgeous, a pro at charming everyone. Me? I loved drawing, coding, stuff nobody in the house gave a damn about. "It's just a phase," Dad said, when I dropped out of college to chase my startup dream. "Politicians and newspaper people love a good phase. You'll grow out of it, and get a real job." But I didn't grow out of it. I worked nights, taught myself to code from YouTube tutorials, and built Cascade Logic from nothing. Those early days, I lived on ramen, crashed on a second-hand couch, and hid it all from my family. Not because I was scared, but because I knew they'd laugh in my face. Mom once said right to me, "If Noah was half as good as Sophie, I'd be happy." Every jab at the BBQ cut deeper than they knew. I remembered when Sophie got her scholarship. Mom hugged her and said, "You're my only hope." I was standing right there, and all I got was a head shake. I learned to stay quiet, but inside, I swore I'd prove them wrong. Now, with Cascade Logic thriving, my corner office overlooking Camelback Mountain, I still kept it secret. Not because I needed their approval, but because I wanted them to face the truth themselves and feel the sting of their own blindness. I wasn't a failure. I was Evan Lynn, the guy who built an empire in the shadows. In the middle of the crowd, I spotted Jake Miller, an old high school buddy, the only one not eyeing me with pity. Jake, now a software engineer, strolled over, beer in hand. "Noah man, been a minute. Heard you're doing something with tech, right?" he asked, genuinely curious. I gave a half smile. "Yeah, something like that." Jake squinted, like he sensed more. "You're not the type to mess around with small stuff. I bet you're hiding something big." I shrugged, not ready to spill. Jake was the only one who ever saw me as more than a screw-up, back when we teamed up on a school project. He'd said, "Noah, you've got a brain for changing the world." My family, they never saw it. Jake clapped my shoulder. When you're ready to brag, hit me up. I know you're not some average Joe. His words were like a spark in the dark, a reminder that not everyone was as blind as the Carter. I nodded, a rare warmth cutting through the storm inside me. Thanks, Jake. Maybe I'll tell you the story someday. The BBQ vibe turned suffocating as Mom kept hyping Sophie. She just got an interview with Cascade Logic, she shouted, making everyone spin around. Top-tier tech company. Sophie's gonna be running their strategy team. Sophie beamed, chiming in. They reached out to me directly. I'm basically a shoo-in. Linda raised her glass. You're a superstar, Sophie. I stood there knowing Sophie's resume was sitting in my inbox, part of the candidate shortlist. But my family had no idea I was Evan Lynn, the one who'd decide her fate. Then Mom turned to me, her voice dripping venom. And you, Noah, still screwing around with that pointless project of yours. 32 and nothing to show for it. The crowd snickered. Dad piled on, his tone sharp. This guy's all dreams, no game. Not like Sophie, who actually works. Sophie smirked, tossing in, hey Noah, maybe I can get you an office gig at Cascade Logic. They probably need a janitor. The laughter hit like a punch. I stepped forward, my voice shaking with rage. You don't know a damn thing about me. I'm not a failure. Mom shrieked, don't you dare talk back. You're an embarrassment, Noah. Dad pointed at me, face red. Get the hell out. I don't need a loser ruining our night. Sophie laughed outright. Go on, Noah, don't wreck my party. I clenched my fists, blood pounding in my ear. Whoa. Fine, I said, my voice cold as ice. You're all gonna regret this. I turned and walked off, their mocking laughter fading behind me, my resolve burning brighter than ever. Tomorrow Sophie would walk into that interview room, and my family would learn just how wrong they were. As I pulled my black SUV out of the driveway, the mocking laughter from the family BBQ still echoed in my head. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to choke down the rage burning in my chest. The barbecue was supposed to be a time for bonding, but for me, it was a public humiliation. My mom, Diane, had screamed that I was a failure in front of everyone. My dad, Robert, kicked me out like I was some unwanted guest. And my sister, Sophie, with her smug grin, offered to find me a janitor job. I thought about my corner office on the 27th floor of Cascade Logic, where I ran a multi-million-dollar empire under the name Evan Lynn. They knew nothing, and that made me feel both hurt and strangely satisfied. Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed nonstop. The family group chat was blowing up with attacks. Mom wrote, Noah, you're an absolute disgrace. How dare you talk back to me in front of everyone? Who do you think you are? Dad piled on, don't come back until you learn some respect. Sophie's the one making us proud. Aunt Linda, with her fake moral tone, chimed in, Noah, you need to learn to honor your family. Sophie's doing big things. What about you? I scrolled through the messages, each one like a fresh stab. Sophie didn't text directly, but Mom forwarded her LinkedIn post. Honored to interview at Cascade Logic. Ready to dominate as a strategy director. #future leader #techstar. Mom commented, that's my star daughter. I let out a bitter laugh. They had no idea I held the candidate list, and Sophie was walking into a battle she couldn't win. I pulled over a few miles from the house, the twinkling lights of Phoenix stretching out before me. Relatives kept texting, some calling me selfish, others a disrespectful punk. I muted the notifications, but my blood was still boiling. They didn't just humiliate me at the BBQ, they turned me into gossip fodder behind my back. I swore that tomorrow, when Sophie stepped into that interview room, they'd see how costly their insults were. Sitting in the car, my mind drifted to the past, where old wounds still festered. Growing up, I was always compared to Sophie. She was the golden child, perfect grades, awards, a smile that won everyone over. I remembered when I was 15, showing Dad a computer game I'd coded myself. He barely glanced at it and said, stop wasting time, study hard, like Sophie. Mom was worse. When I told her I wanted to start a company, she laughed. What, you think you're Elon Musk? Get real. Those words didn't just sting, they fueled me. I left home, rented a dumpy apartment in Tempe, and poured everything into Cascade Logic. Sleepless nights, near bankruptcies. I got through it all, with no help from anyone. Now, as my family kept calling me a failure, I didn't feel sad anymore. I was angry, not because they were wrong, but because they never bothered to ask, never bothered to see. They didn't know I'd built a company. Forbes praised that I'd signed deals with Fortune 100 giants. They only saw Noah, the useless older brother, Sophie's shadow. But I didn't need their validation anymore. I just needed them to face the truth and feel the burn of how wrong they'd been. Tomorrow Sophie would walk into that interview, and I'd make sure she learned arrogance doesn't beat reality. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it for justice, for myself, and for the years they trampled my dreams. As I checked my phone, a message from Jake Miller popped up, cutting through my thoughts. Yo Noah, saw you storm out of the BBQ. You good? Your family was kinda brutal. I gave a faint smile. Jake was always different. Back in high school, when everyone laughed at me for geeking out over coding, Jake was the one who said, "Keep at it, man." Now a software engineer. He still had that curiosity about me. I replied, "Yeah, just family drama. They think I'm a loser, as usual." Jake shot back, "A loser? Nah, I ain't buying it. You're up to something big, aren't you? Stop holding out on me." I hesitated, then typed, "Got a small company, growing fast. Family doesn't know." I didn't mention I was Evan Lin, CEO of Cascade Logic. Jake responded instantly, "Small company. With your brain, I bet it's huge. Spill the beans sometime, yeah? And don't let your family's crap get to you. They don't see the real you." His words were like a cool breeze in a storm. He didn't know the full truth, but his belief in me felt like a lifeline. I texted back, "Thanks man, might tell you soon." Jake sent a fist bump emoji, like he was cheering me on. I pocketed my phone, my resolve hardening. Jake reminded me, not everyone was as blind as the Carter. That made me even more determined to show them how wrong they were. As I drove back to my downtown Phoenix apartment, Sophie kept heating up the family group chat. Mom forwarded another LinkedIn post from her. "Can't wait for my Cascade Logic interview. The strategy director role is mine. #future leader, #tech star." Dad texted, "That's my girl. Sophie, you're gonna blow their minds." Aunt Linda added, "You're a role model for the next generation." I scrolled through, feeling a mix of amusement and anger. Sophie hadn't even set foot in the interview room, but she was already crowning herself director. She had no clue her resume was on my desk, and her boasts only made me itch to expose her. When I got home, I opened my laptop and saw an email from Mom, attaching a photo of Sophie in a Chanel suit, posing in front of Cascade Logic's sign. Mom wrote, "Look at her, Noah. You should take notes from your sister. She knows how to make things happen." I smirked. Sophie could fool the family with her polished look, but I knew the truth. Her resume was padded, internships from Dad's connections, glowing reviews from our uncle's firm, skills as shallow as a kiddie pool. She thought she'd dominate Cascade Logic. She didn't know Noah held the power to decide who got hired. I pictured her face when she saw me at the head of the interview table, and it felt damn good. Mom texted again, "Noah, you owe us an apology for ruining the BBQ. Sophie's making the family proud, and all you do is cause trouble." I didn't reply. They'd soon find out who was really causing trouble. The next morning, I arrived at Cascade Logic's office at 6:30 a.m. as dawn painted golden streaks across Camelback Mountain. The quiet hum of servers booting up was oddly calming. I wore a navy Tom Ford suit, feeling like I'd slipped into armor. My 27th floor corner office, with floor-to-ceiling glass, was proof of the sweat and tears I'd poured into this company. I sat at my desk, opened Sophie's file. On paper she looked flawless, elite degrees, shiny recommendation letter. But I knew better. Her internships were handed to her. Her praise bought by family ties, her skills barely skin deep. Sophie wasn't ready for Cascade Logic, and I'd make sure she exposed herself. My executive assistant, Ava Torres, knocked and stepped in, handing me a slim folder. "Sophie Bennett's interview, 9 a.m. sharp," she said, a sly grin on her face. "She's already here, 25 minutes early, telling the front desk she's gonna modernize the company." I laughed. "Is that so? Let's see what she's got." Ava raised an eyebrow. "The board's wondering why you're handling this one yourself." I shrugged. "Quality control." I glanced at the schedule. Sophie would face 3 interviews before mine. Each was designed to crack her arrogance, strip away her glossy facade. I closed the folder, a cold confidence settling in. Sophie thought she'd waltz in and take over. She was about to meet Evan Lin, and I'd make sure she never forgot it. Early that morning, as I left my office to check emails, my phone buzzed relentlessly. The family group chat was still hammering me after the BBQ fiasco. "Mom, Diane," texted with venom. "Noah, you're a selfish jerk. Storming out mid-party just because you can't handle the truth? You'll never change." Dad Robert piled on, "I told you you're a loser and you proved it. Sophie's making the Carters proud, and you're just tearing us down." Aunt Linda, with her usual fake piety, chimed in, "Noah, you need to take a hard look at yourself. Sophie's about to be a director. What are you doing? Stirring up trouble? I scrolled through, feeling like I was being pelted from all sides. They didn't just humiliate me at the BBQ, they'd turned me into the family villain behind my back. It didn't stop there. Mom called, her voice screeching through the speaker. Noah, you think you're hot stuff talking back to me. Sophie's prepping for a huge interview, and you ruined her party. Apologize now, or don't call me mom anymore. I stayed silent, letting her rant before hanging up. Right after, Sophie posted another LinkedIn update. Counting down to my Cascade Logic interview. The strategy director role is mine. Game changer #tech elite. Mom shared it, commenting my daughter's a true star. Unlike someone who only causes problems. I smirked, thinking of Sophie's resume on my desk. She could fool the family with her polished act, but she didn't know Evan Lynn, held the keys to her dream. I ignored the texts. They'd soon find out who was really causing problems. At Cascade Logic's office, I stepped into the sleek space with floor-to-ceiling glass, overlooking Phoenix's glaring sunrise. The outside temp hit 90 degrees Fahrenheit, but inside, the AC kept things crisp. I settled at my walnut desk, checking the schedule. Sophie's interview was set for 9 a.m., with 3 preliminary rounds before she faced me. Each round was crafted to crack her arrogance, to let her expose her own lack of substance. I opened her file again. Degrees from Wharton and MIT, glowing recommendation letters, all picture perfect. But I knew the truth. Internships handed to her by dad's buddies. Praise bought by our uncle's firm. Skills as shallow as a LinkedIn post. Ava Torres, my assistant, knocked and walked in, a coffee in hand. Sophie Bennett's here. In the lobby, she said, smirking. Just told the front desk, she's gonna reshape our strategy. Confident, huh? I chuckled. Let's see how she reshapes it. Ava set the coffee down, asking, why are you handling this interview yourself? The board's curious. I shrugged. Gotta make sure we don't hire the wrong fit. Ava nodded, but her eyes hinted she knew I was holding something back. I checked my inbox, spotting a note from HR. Sophie Bennett posted about joining Cascade Logic on social media. I shook my head. She hadn't even entered the interview room, but she was already calling herself a director. I closed my laptop, a cold confidence rising. Sophie thought she'd waltz in and take over. She'd learn soon enough that bravado doesn't cut it here. Sitting in my office, I let my mind drift to the journey of building Cascade Logic. 10 years ago, I was a 22-year-old, with a beat-up laptop and a big dream. I rented a moldy apartment in Tempe, where the smell of damp and the hum of roaches were my roommates. I taught myself to code from YouTube, worked through the night, and sent hundreds of cold emails to land clients. Some months, I had $50 left in my account, but I never quit. When Cascade Logic scored its first contract, I cried, not for the money, but because I knew I was on the right path. Over the years, I built a team, signed deals with Fortune 100 giants, and put the company on America's tech map. Forbes called me a game changer, but my family, they still saw useless Noah. Every insult from the BBQ to today's texts was like fuel on a fire. Shuk self, once Testerov or Kontravibar. Once Testerov or Partrivlen. Once Testerov or Partrivlaus. I wasn't doing this for their applause. I was doing it to make them face the truth, that I'd risen above their stereotypes, their mockery, to become Evan Lynn, head of Piles. Sophie thought she could strut in and steal the spotlight. She didn't know I'd set the stage for her to fall. I didn't need to scream at her, or the family. I'd let the truth, and Sophie's failure, speak for me. I looked out at Camelback Mountain, my resolve burning. Today my family would start to realize just how wrong they'd been. As I reviewed the schedule, my phone buzzed. Jake Miller was calling. I picked up, hearing his concerned voice. Yo Noah, just heard from Aunt Linda about the BBQ. Your family's out of line. They're saying you bailed, 'cause you're jealous of Sophie. What's going on? I sighed, touched that Jake still cared. Same old drama, Jake. They think I'm a loser. Sophie's a star. Jake snorted over the line. A star? I bet Sophie's not half as good as her Instagram makes out. But you? I know you're up to something big. What's this company of yours? For real. I chuckled. Still vague. Just a tech thing, growing fast. I'll spill later. Jake didn't let up. Noah, I'm not dumb. With your brain, that company's gotta be huge. Your family's screwing up by underestimating you. His words were like a shot of adrenaline, a reminder that not everyone was as blind as the Carter. Thanks, Jake, I said. Just wait. It'll all come out soon. Jake laughed. I'm holding you to that, man. Don't let them drag you down. I hung up, my determination sharper. Jake didn't know I was Evan Lynn, but his faith was a light in the dark, pushing me to make my family regret their work. I turned back to Sophie's file, scanning every line. On paper, she was a dream candidate, but I knew those stats and buzzwords were just polished fluff. I pictured the interview. Sophie striding in, confident as a queen, spouting memorized buzzwords. The interviewers would hit her with tough questions, digging into her experience, and I knew she'd stumble. When she reached me, I'd face her as Evan Lynn, and that smug look would vanish. I didn't need to yell at her or the family. I just needed the truth, and Sophie's lack of substance to do the talking. I stood, gazing through the glass at Phoenix's skyline. In a few hours, Sophie would walk into that interview room, and everything would shift. I checked my watch, 7:30 a.m. 90 minutes, until the game began. I adjusted my tie, feeling like a fighter stepping into the ring. Sophie thought she'd modernize. Cascade logic, she was about to meet me, and I'd make sure she never forgot it. With a cold smile, I sat back down, ready for the next move in my plan. I stood behind the one-way glass on the upper floor of Cascade Logic, watching Sophie Bennett stride into the conference room. She wore a tailored Chanel suit, Prada heels clicking, exuding confidence like a queen. The early Phoenix sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting her smug smile as she shook hands with the first interviewer. I crossed my arms, knowing this was the beginning of her downfall. Ava Torres, my assistant, stood beside me whispering, "She thinks she's going to eat this room alive." I smirked. Let her try. The first interview kicked off. A senior HR director asked Sophie about her experience in strategic management. She answered smoothly, parroting buzzwords from textbooks. "I'm passionate about optimizing workflows and driving sustainable growth. But when pressed deeper, what specific strategy have you implemented in a real-world setting?" Sophie faltered. She mentioned an internship project, one I knew well, a report written by colleagues, with her name slapped on the cover. The interviewer jotted notes, her eyes skeptical. I smiled. Sophie's glossy facade was already cracking. The second round was tougher. A lead engineer grilled her on data analytics, a skill Sophie claimed to master on LinkedIn. She fumbled when asked to explain a forecasting model. "Well, I usually work with the tech team," she hedged, but her eyes betrayed panic. Ava murmured, "She's sinking." I nodded, a rush of satisfaction rising. Sophie wasn't prepared for real questions. She'd always relied on her looks and connections. By the third round, an executive director probed her on company culture. Sophie recycled more buzzwords, but when challenged on handling team conflicts, she rambled, her voice shaky. Her confident smile was now forced, her eyes tired. I checked my watch 10 minutes until she faced me. I headed back to my office, prepping for the final round. Sophie had been pushed to the edge, but she didn't know the worst was coming. Ava handed me reports from the prior rounds. All three interviewers noted lacking depth, overconfident, unprepared. I nodded. Good. My turn. I adjusted my tie, feeling like a boxer stepping into the ring. Sophie thought she'd modernize. Cascade logic. She was about to learn a brutal lesson. Sophie walked into my office, trying to mask her awe at the sleek space floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking Camelback Mountain, curated art on the walls, and an air of quiet power. I sat with my back to her, chair turned toward the city view. "Please, have a seat, Miss Bennett," I said, my voice cool and clipped. Sophie sat, attempting to regain her poise. "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Lynn," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. "I know your time is valuable." I swiveled my chair slowly, locking eyes with her. "Actually," I said, "it's Mr. Carter. Do you know a Carter? Or Mr. Evan Lynn, if you prefer." Sophie's face went pale, like the blood had drained from her body. Her mouth fell open, eyes blinking rapidly. "Noah," she stammered. "No, that's impossible." I gave a calm smile. "Surprised to see your useless brother running the company you're begging to work for." Sophie shook her head, as if denying reality. "But, Mom said you were just some freelance consultant. How can you be Evan Lynn?" I gestured to the wall behind me, lined with innovation awards, patents, and a Forbes cover hailing Cascade Logic as the Southwest's tech wildfire. "I built this company from nothing," I said, my tone even. "While you and Mom laughed at my pathetic project, I was negotiating global contracts. While Dad called me a dreamer, I landed Cascade Logic on the Fortune 100 list. You think you know this company. You don't know a thing." Sophie tried to steady herself, her voice trembling. "You lied to us. You hid everything. Let us think you were a failure." I tilted my head, cold as ice. "No, Sophie, you all lied to yourselves. You were so busy calling me a loser. None of you bothered to ask what I was doing. I opened my phone, showing her the six-figure Venmo I'd just sent for Dad's birthday gift. This is the gift money Mom said I owed. To me it's pocket change. Sophie's eyes welled up, not with sadness, but with angry, humiliated tears. You had your shot today, I said, my voice firm. But 3 directors, independently, rejected you. Too arrogant, too shallow, unprepared. You failed yourself. Sophie screamed. You set me up. You rigged this to make me fail. I stood, smoothing my suit. I gave you exactly what you asked for, an interview with the CEO. Not my fault you weren't ready. Sophie shot to her feet, her heels wobbling. Do Mom and Dad know? She asked, her voice breaking. They will, I said, opening the door. I'm sure you'll tell them all about meeting Evan Lynn. Ava appeared, escorting Sophie out. Her sobs echoed down the hall, not the victory lap she'd envisioned. As the office door closed, I sat back down, staring out at Phoenix's skyline. A wave of satisfaction washed over me, but it came with a hollow ache. I'd waited years for this moment, for Sophie and the family to face the truth. Watching her crumble, from self-proclaimed star to a humiliated failure, just as they'd labeled me, was deeply gratifying. But deep down, I knew this victory didn't heal the old wounds. The insults at the BBQ, the years of being dismissed, they lingered. Like scars that never fade. I didn't do this to win their love. I did it to prove I didn't need them. I'd built Cascade Logic, an empire from scratch, without a single word of encouragement from the Carter. Sophie's failure wasn't because I rigged anything. She failed because she wasn't good enough, because her arrogance blinded her to her own limits. And the family? They'd soon learn the truth, not from my word, but from Sophie's collapse. I opened my laptop, checking emails, but my mind replayed Sophie's exit. I didn't need to scream at them. The truth had done that for me, and that was the most elegant revenge of all. My phone buzzed as I reviewed the afternoon schedule. Jake Miller texted, "Yo, just heard from Linda that Sophie bombed her Cascade Logic interview. She's crying all over the place. What's the deal? I bet you know something." I grinned, picturing Linda's face when she got the news. "She just wasn't up to it," I replied, still vague. Jake shot back, "Not up to it. At that company you mentioned, Noah. I know you're involved somehow. Spill, man." I shook my head, typing, "Just wait, Jake. It'll all come out soon." Jake didn't let up. "I'm telling you, that small company of yours ain't small. Your family's dumb for underestimating you, and now they're paying for it." His words were like a cool breeze, reminding me not everyone was as blind as my family. "Thanks, Jake," I texted. "I'll fill you in when the time's right." Jake replied with a fist bump emoji, like he was rooting for me. I pocketed my phone, my confidence surging. Jake didn't know I was Evan Lynn, but his suspicions were a spark, pushing me to see this story through to the end. Less than an hour later, my phone lit up with an urgent Zoom invite from the family. I knew what was coming. I opened my laptop, joined the call, and saw the furious faces of Mom, Dad, and Sophie. Sophie, eyes swollen, screamed the second I appeared. "Noah, you sabotaged me. You deliberately made me fail that interview." Mom jumped in, her voice shrill. "You're a monster. Sophie had a huge opportunity, and you dared me. I didn't raise you to betray your family." Dad roared, "You're no son of mine. Sophie's our pride, and all you do is hurt her." You're no son of mine. Sophie's our pride, and all you do is hurt her." I sat still, letting them vent. When they paused, I spoke, my voice icy. "I didn't sabotage Sophie. She sabotaged herself." 3 directors, independently, rejected her for being arrogant, unprepared, and shallow. Want to blame someone? Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. Look in. Sophie sobbed, shrieking. "You're lying. You set it up to make me fail. You're jealous because I'm better." I laughed bitterly. "Better? Sophie, you posted about being a director before even interviewing. That's not talent, that's delusion." Mom screamed, "Don't you dare insult your sister. You're a loser, Noah. If you were worth anything, you'd be like Sophie." I leaned toward the screen, my voice cutting. "A loser? Google Cascade Logic. Google Evan Lynn. Then tell me who's worthless." Dad's eyes widened. "What are you babbling about? Evan Lynn's the CEO, not you." I shrugged. "Look it up. And when you see the truth, ask yourselves why none of you ever asked what I was doing." Sophie yelled, "You tricked us. You're a fake." I shook my head. "No, Sophie. You all tricked yourselves. You were too busy tearing me down to see anything else. Aunt Linda texted in the group chat. Noah, you're cruel. Sophie's suffering. I typed one line. Suffering. That's the price of arrogance. Then I left the call, muting notifications. My family was stunned, divided, but I didn't care. They'd chosen Sophie's side, and now they'd face the consequences. I turned back to my work, a sense of freedom, spreading. The truth had spoken, and I didn't need to say another word. 3 months after the fateful interview, Forbes dropped a bombshell: quiet success. The man who built $1 billion company while his family called him a failure. The cover featured me, Noah Carter, in a sharp suit, standing against Phoenix's skyline, Cascade Logic's logo blazing in the background. The article detailed my journey, from grinding in a rundown Tempe apartment to leading a top-tier U.S. tech company. It highlighted the sleepless nights, the near bankruptcies, and my persistence despite my family's scorn. The final line hit hard. Success doesn't need to shout. It signs the checks. I mailed 10 copies of the magazine to every family member, each with a short note. You didn't see me then. You can't ignore me now. Their reactions were predictable. Dad Robert texted privately. Noah, I was wrong. I had no idea what you'd done. I'm sorry. But Mom, Diane, and Sophie went the other way. Mom called, screaming through the phone. You sent this magazine to humiliate me, didn't you? You're a traitor. Sophie texted the group chat. You think you're hot because you're in Forbes? You're still a fraud. Aunt Linda wrote, Noah, you're too cruel. Why do this to your family? I didn't respond. They could rage all they wanted, but the truth was out, and no one could deny I was Evan Lynn, the loser they'd mocked. The family was visibly fractured now, but I didn't care. The Forbes piece was the final blow, and I'd won. Sitting in my 27th floor office, watching Camelback Mountain glow under the sunset, I felt a deep calm. This journey wasn't just about proving my family wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above every stereotype, every insult. Growing up, I was the extra kid, compared to Sophie, mocked for my dreams. But each jab became a brick I used to build Cascade Logic. I didn't need Mom's hugs like Sophie got. Didn't need Dad's pat on the back like she did. I needed myself, and I delivered. The biggest lesson I learned wasn't about revenge. It was about self-worth. I realized you don't need others' validation to succeed. You just need to believe in yourself, work hard, and let the results speak. My family paid a price, not because I wanted them to hurt. They paid because they chose blindness, chose arrogance over truth. I looked out at Phoenix's skyline, thinking of everyone out there, people dismissed by their families or society. I wanted to tell them, don't give up. Your success is the loudest answer. I closed my laptop, stood up, ready for new challenges with Cascade Logic. I'd freed myself, and that was my greatest victory. One afternoon, Jake Miller showed up at my office, grinning ear to ear. Noah, you king of Cascade Logic, he shouted, high-fiving me. I read the Forbes article. You're a legend, man. How'd you keep this from me so long? I laughed, warmed by Jake's admiration. I wasn't hiding, I said. Just didn't feel like bragging. Jake shook his head. Bragging? You built an empire. I always knew you'd do something huge. Your family's probably eating themselves alive, huh? I shrugged. They don't matter anymore. Jake clapped my shoulder. Exactly. You don't need them. You've got me, and the whole world to conquer. His words were like a fresh breeze, reminding me I wasn't alone. Thanks, Jake, I said. You always had my back. He winked. Always, bro. Now treat me to dinner, Mr. CEO. We cracked up, our friendship stronger than ever. The Carter family never recovered. The BBQs stopped, replaced by tense silence. Sophie took a clerical job at a small Phoenix firm. No title, no spotlight. She avoided relatives, living in the shadow of her failure. Mom and Dad barely spoke to me, but I heard they were quietly combing through articles about Evan Lynn, trying to grasp their mistake. Dad sent another text. Brief. Noah, I want to talk. When you're ready. I didn't reply. Relatives gossiped. Some admired me. Others called me the family record. I didn't care. Their fracture was their own doing, not mine. I returned to Cascade Logic, spearheading new European deals, mentoring young founders, and scaling the company. Each day, I lived true to my values, no longer needing the family's glow. The Forbes article wasn't just my win. It was a reminder that success doesn't need others' approval. I'd found freedom, and I'd never lose it. If you've made it this far, thank you for sticking with me through this story. I'm Noah Carter, and I hope my journey hit home, even just a little. If you've ever been dismissed by family, friends, or society, I see you. I was the guy they laughed at, but I stood up and built an empire. You can too. Share your story in the comments, not to brag, but to find peace for yourself. If this story inspired you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. We're a community of quiet warriors. And I want to hear about your small victories. What challenge are you facing? Or what win are you proud of? Drop it below. I read every comment. Thanks for being here, and keep fighting. We'll do big things, one step at a time.